Last week, we looked at the front end, how Meta turned fraud into a pricing tier, how the company budgeted for $16 billion in scam related ad revenue, how the fines were smaller than the profits, so the math kept working. I want to pick up where we left off, because that episode ended with a question I couldn't answer yet. If the ads are the delivery system, who's on the other end? Who's running the operations that turn those ads into empty bank accounts? I'm Carl Kim. This is Interconnected. About 300,000 people have been trafficked into industrial scam compounds across Southeast Asia. Some of these places are the size of small towns, 500 acres, multiple buildings, guards, walls, checkpoints. And the person on the other end of the phone, the one texting you as the fake boyfriend or a fake advisor, is often not a mastermind. They're a captive worker, beaten if they miss quota, sold to a worse compound if they push back. The carrier that routes the call, the crypto exchange that moves the money, the satellite network that keeps the compound connected after authorities cut power. These aren't fringe operators, they're big name companies, American, public, on the major indices, in your pocket right now. That's the machine I want to map today. Let's go back to Diane for a moment. She's a retiree who lost her savings through Facebook and Coinbase. She met a man in a gardening group. They messaged for 4 months. He never asked for money. She raised it after he mentioned a crypto investment. The person messaging Diane probably wasn't a lone scammer in a cafe. Odds are he was working inside a highly organized compound in Southeast Asia. We're not talking about a few dozen people in a warehouse. We're talking about roughly 300,000 people trafficked from around 66 countries. Some sites house thousands of workers, some run like sealed towns, multiple stories, guards, barracks, parameters. Then there's the piece that made me stop taking notes. The worker doing the scamming is often there against their will. I need to say that slowly because it sounds like a contradiction. The person stringing Diane along for 4 months, building trust, pulling her savings out of her account, that person may have been trafficked themselves. They show up for what they think is a normal job. Someone takes their passport. They're told they have to bring in something like $9,500 a day from victims or face discipline. That can mean beatings, fines that push them deeper into debt bondage, being sold to another compound. One survivor from Thailand said their managers told them they had to pull in 300,000 baht a day. Fall short, you're punished or sold. Another person, forced to move money for the syndicate, ended up facing criminal charges even after being rescued, charges tied to the fraudulent activity in the accounts they were forced to manage. They described feeling like a floating house. No anchor, not a victim in the legal system, not a perpetrator in their own mind, just stuck. On paper, I agree with the non-punishment principle. The idea that people trafficked into these compounds shouldn't be prosecuted for crimes that are a direct result of their trafficking. I don't want these people in prison. But the UN's own reporting notes that some workers go in with their eyes open. There's a spectrum. Some people are tricked, some corner themselves, some mix both. And then I'm arguing with myself in circles. If I say every worker is purely a victim, I erase the people who absolutely knew they were signing up to defraud strangers. If I say we should neatly separate them into good and bad, I erase the reality that most of them are operating under very real threats. I'm not sure there is a clean answer here. At this point, I'm holding several pieces. The ad platforms, with their managed decline in premium pricing. The compounds, running on forced or coerced labor at massive scale. But something else starts to bother me. It's not just that this structure exists, it's what's keeping it running? What does it plug into? Because a scam compound in Myanmar or Cambodia can't function in a vacuum. It needs ways to reach people like Diane, ways to move their money, ways to stay connected. Crypto solved an old problem for fraud, moving large amounts of money across borders without going through the usual banking choke points. A researcher at the University of Texas put it bluntly. Before, it was hard to push big volumes of stolen money through the traditional system. You ran into know your customer rules, reporting thresholds, human tellers. Cryptocurrency changed that. Once scammers collect funds, they overwhelmingly route it to Tether. In that UT study, about 84% of transaction volume was in Tether. And those cash outs aren't happening only on obscure offshore sites. Chain analysis data shows criminals increasingly using fully regulated exchanges with strong compliance programs. Since around 2021, those have been the most used off ramps. That brings us back to Diane. She picked Coinbase because it felt safe, familiar brand, US based, regulated. She thought, if there's something wrong here, a company like that will catch it. Instead, her transaction sailed through. The UT study estimated around $15 billion from scams moving through 5 major exchanges, including Coinbase, the same rails you use to buy a little Bitcoin on a Saturday afternoon. There's no special criminal pipe. It's the same pipe. Now, if you zoom out again, you start to see companies that sit above even that. One example is Huion, a conglomerate that has handled close to $100 billion in crypto transactions since 2021. It's like an all-in-one vendor for scam operations, tools to create fake personas using AI, services to launder proceeds, logistics. This is not some hidden Tor site. It looks like a business. Underneath all of this is what people in the field call jurisdictional arbitrage. These compounds cluster in areas where the state is weak, captured, or has other priorities. Weak law enforcement, light regulation, instability. Layer onto that COVID-19, the 2021 military coup in Myanmar, the role of long-standing gambling syndicates in Cambodia and Laos. In Cambodia, a nephew of the former prime minister has been linked to massive online scam operations, including the theft of more than $49 billion in digital assets since 2021. And then there's the piece that pulled the whole thing into focus for me. When authorities in Myanmar cut power and internet to some compounds to literally turn them off, criminal groups reportedly turned to Starlink for connectivity. In 2025, officials found dozens of Starlink receivers in compounds around Myawaddy, American satellite equipment keeping fraud operations online after the government tried to shut them down. The machine that targets you is built out of the same tools you use when you're just trying to live your life. Facebook finds you. Coinbase moves your money. Starlink keeps the building online when the lights should have gone out. That's not a metaphor. That's literally how it's set up. So where does this leave me? To explore that, I pulled together another composite voice, this time from conversations with researchers who study fraud and infrastructure. I was asking a version of this. Is there a fix that doesn't wreck the open internet? And one of them said something that stuck with me. He said the same friction that would make life hard for scammers is the friction we've been trained to be angry about. All the little things we grumble about. Two-factor prompts, identity checks, cooling off periods, delays. Scammers thrive when those things are weak or missing. And the dominant business model of the internet, move fast, low friction, sign up in 30 seconds, rests on a pretty optimistic assumption that most people are honest. At scale, that assumption starts to fall apart. He argued that platforms are pinned between two bad options. If they tighten verification across the board, they break some of what makes the internet powerful. Small advertisers in poor countries, dissidents who need pseudonyms, activists who can't show their legal name on screen. If they stay loose, they end up serving as delivery systems for crime. Then he added one more thing. And even the trade-off might be the easy part, because AI is about to trash your gut instincts about what's real. Take the Arup case, a British engineering firm. An employee gets a video call that appears to be from senior leadership. Multiple faces, familiar voices. They tell him to transfer $25 million. He does it. Every single face and voice on that call was synthetic, deep faked. $25 million gone. Chain analysis found that vendors selling scam-related AI tools took in at least $375 million in cryptocurrency in 2024. Some of those vendors had compound annual growth rates around 1,900%. That's not a typo. For a long time, we treated certain senses as reliable. If you're on a live video call with your boss, that is your boss. Those assumptions are now broken. If you line everything up, a pattern emerges. The platform you lean on aren't just neutral pipes, they're part of the mechanism. Some of them have literally budgeted for a certain amount of harm. The person trying to take your money might be enslaved. And the last thing you fall back on, your eyes, your ears, aren't as solid as they used to be. A lot of investigations end in something practical. Here's a checklist. Here's a rule of thumb. I don't have a neat version of that this time. The uncomfortable read of the evidence is that individual vigilance barely moves the needle against deepfakes and industrial-scale targeting. The meaningful leverage is structural. Who's liable? Where we add friction? Which rails are allowed to move money for whom? There is some personal advice I'm following, though. I treat video calls as unverified until I confirm through a second channel. I assume any platform I use can serve me a fraudulent ad. When I hit friction, moving money, a flagged transaction, extra questions, a delay, I try to pause and see that as a safety feature, not just annoyance. If a platform never pushes back, that's not great UX. That might just mean they're happy to move anything. But the bigger shift for me is the question I'm asking. I used to ask, can I spot the scam? Now I'm more likely to ask, who built this pipe? What do they get out of keeping it smooth? And what happens to me if things go wrong? For policymakers, those questions get sharper. If a company is literally budgeting for fines as a running cost, the penalties are too small. If a payment system keeps processing fraud proceeds and calls it unfortunate, the verification regime is inadequate. If a satellite network shows up in compounds that run on forced labor, you have to rethink how you handle end use. The tools to apply pressure exist. We just haven't really picked them up. I started with one detail I couldn't shake. Meta charging more for ads it thinks are fraudulent. I'm ending with two. Rows of Starlink dishes on buildings where people are being held and forced to scam strangers. American satellites keeping those places online after the power gets cut. Between those points, you can trace a chain. Big platforms that connect us, payment rails that move our money, satellite networks that keep everything humming. All of it built and branded as progress. All of it available for uses most of us never see. And at the far end, the person pressing send on the scam message might be imprisoned, beaten, sold. Those tidy roles we like, obvious victim over here, obvious villain over there, clean line between legit and criminal, don't make sense once you lay out the whole thing. Everything bleeds into everything else. Diane asked why all the shame landed on her. Why was she the one lying awake at night when the platform served the ad, the exchange moved the money, and the satellite kept the compound online? I still don't have a real answer. But the direction of that shame, who absorbs it and who doesn't, tells you a lot about how the incentives are set up. What I'm left with is a kind of uneasy recognition. The tools I rely on can double as hostile infrastructure. The delays I hate might be the only protection I've got. And the person trying to rip me off might be just as trapped in this thing as I am, just on a different floor. That's not closure. It's a new way of facing the same facts. Next time on Interconnected, we're going to follow one thread out of this mess. If you can't trust what you see or hear, what does trust even become? We'll dive into the deepfake market, not the cool demo videos, but the actual economy underneath. Who's buying, who's selling, and what it means when the only thing that can reliably catch a lie is another machine. I'm Carl Kim. This is Interconnected.